tēnā koutou katoa. So I'll just tell a bit of my story for a start. So we're into storytelling today. Most of my life I've worked in chaotic, dynamic, non-linear, and in the end self-organising systems. That is, as Chris explained, I've been a vegetable grower, a nurseryman, and for the last couple of decades a seed breeder. But I find understanding those adaptive complex systems been a great help in working with health. So my journey into consumer leadership started in 2001 when asked by Laurie Davidson to speak at a mental health recovery day he had organised in Whanganui. And Laurie had come to Whanganui for a 6-month stint as Services Development Manager, and that was the first time I'd come to speak out publicly about my experience as a mental health consumer I had through the 1970s. So my consumer experience arrived while I was still at school. I had these habits of talking over the top of people, being obnoxious, changing the subject in the middle of a sentence, being hypercritical, and talking in rhythmic verbal nonsensibilities. And they were just my good points. And all this meant I was asylum bound, really. So some 10 years in and out of one of the old asylums followed. And then through the 90s and early 2000s, I became a member of a small manic depressive support group, which later evolved into the NGO Balance. Whanganui DHB provided funding for our consumer governed and run group in 2009 to develop peer support, advocacy and consultation and leadership services. So I suggest that mental health and addictions in health has led the way in the development of paid consumer leadership. The reasons for this are varied, but especially important are the significant rights issues that needed to be put right by the 90s. Mental health services had operated in a very paternalistic way, with mental health issues being seen by some as a condition treatable only by expert clinicians who made decisions based on the assessment of the patient's best interest. However, important work was done by the consumer leaders and the clinical management and leadership positions of the time that listened and paved the way to ensure rights issues were beginning to be addressed and the way became smoother for an amplified consumer voice at all levels. We always have a way to go, but the ground under our feet is always the start of a journey. Lao Tzu is often quoted as saying, "A journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step." But I tend to like a translation I found recently that says, "A journey of 1,000 miles starts with the ground under our feet," which puts quite a different, I guess, understanding to that. A stock take of where we are, and we do find the resources we've got to take the first step and then finish the journey. So in my experience of the last 5 years, the clinical provider leadership team has completely supported our consumer team in Whanganui. I'm part of we stepped out into this world of partnering with clinicians to improve services. For me, it was not an easy place to start, and it did take some surviving initially. I did tend to view working with clinicians as a them versus us situation. But working with the clinical leaders in the Whanganui DHB, I was able to transition, and our team was able to the good news that them versus us can mean them and us, and that we're all in this together. I've ended up in governance at our DHB, sitting around the DHB board advisory committees. It's been a long journey from a seclusion room in an asylum to a DHB boardroom table. And many of you will know that the mental health services in New Zealand are guided by the Ministry of Health document, Rising to the Challenge. And individual DHBs are required to develop their own plans and how they will respond to this direction set out in this document. So our own DHB produced a strategic framework, which we called Whanganui Rising to the Challenge. We developed this using 3 work streams: child and youth, adults and older people, and I was appointed to lead the adult work stream. The working group consisted of half clinicians and half consumers. and I somehow forgot to appoint a psychiatrist to the work stream. Probably a case of a very good memory but a perfect forgettery, really. So the doctors still laugh about this, and I think John Crawshaw chuckled immensely when he heard that. So that now, and it's interesting, that document now forms the the strategic framework for the whole DHB. Such was the robustness of the consultation process. So, and it's interesting, importantly, the idea of co-design was adopted as the second guiding principle behind person and family-centred planning in this framework. I'm not sure if everyone rightly understood the implications of co-design when it was introduced here, but I guess those people thought it was important to agree with the latest buzzword in the world of management speak. So being given a mandate to lead this piece of work was critical for the consumer voice to be amplified in our local health system. Being called a leader was and still is a bit uncomfortable, as I feel lucky to be given an opportunity to serve. So servant seems a bit better description of what I and our consumer team are about. I'm called the senior consumer consultant. I'm sure that term senior is descriptive of my advancing years more than anything else. And what I'm trying to achieve in the role is to get the consumer voice well and truly heard, and we truly facilitate self-determination. We now have 8 people in our team at Balance, and whilst most other members of the team are going about one-to-one and group peer support work, we all have written into our job descriptions the need to step up into consumer leadership roles as needed. And this has been important for sustainability and growing kind of the experiential learning of people who are, I guess, the next generation of consumer leaders. Being situated in NGO, we have values independence as a consumer team. This also means we have a nurturing place to grow our next lot of consumer leaders. We strive to provide a safe relational environment for people to do their best work. And this is a witness approach rather than an about approach, and direct, honest, respectful communication is key. Whilst a lot of the sentiments expressed in high-level health plans, including Whanganui DHBs and that people-powered health and the smart system that I think Chai and the Minister talked about, to me some of that can sound a bit like apple pie and motherhood, really. Who could possibly disagree with those ideas? And I guess getting the concepts realised and acted upon is all that really matters. For example, providing a responsive person and family-centred service is expressed as a major goal in our quality plan, which I guess is the next step to actualising those concepts. So one of my favourite diagrams of getting to an action or a project is the use of driver diagrams. And whilst you won't be able to see the writing on there, we start with an aim statement out to the left. Underneath we have the measures, and in that particular one it's about providing a seamless journey and a responsive first point of contact. And some of the aims were out to, I guess, reduce the unnecessary medicalisation of life and stress issues. Well, after several, we can knock the curve on the increasing rates of atypicals and antidepressants being described, and you can see primary drivers, secondary drivers, and we get through a change project. And one of them is, which I'm pretty big fan of, is peer support, and that gave kind of us permission to launch into a new project. So while saying yes to co-leading some work does create a bit more work and stress, and Chris will know that I'm not very good at saying no, hence I'm standing up here really. I'm currently leading or co-leading with others, or supporting others sometimes, 8 projects this year, and they're including, I guess, getting experience-based co-design well understood through our staff, ensuring service users have much more detailed self-management plans, building on gains made with least restrictive practices, especially those under Mental Health Act and CTOs, a focus on building a trauma-informed model of care in acute services for a start, integrating peer support services across all the teams, improving the physical health outcomes of mental health service users, and increasing integration between primary and secondary services, and then reducing with an aim to eliminating seclusion and restraint. So an important key part of the framework is this idea of leadership, and I believe this document has been a great example of consumer contribution to planning, and senior management at our DHB were instrumental in allowing this to happen. Decisions on what to do next and the actions that result now always include not just consumer contribution, but now we, as I mentioned, get named to co-lead pieces of work. I think we've come a long way when our planning frameworks talk to the paramount importance of human values, and this document describes, human values like kindness, warmth, and having the ability to instil hope. As a consumer, I love the work I do, really. Just sitting around tables, planning, talking about things in a dialectical and dialogical conversation cannot be too hard, can it, really? And the trick for us has been to rock the walker, but also being able to stay in it. We have to stand up to the challenge the status quo offers when we see there could be a better way, and our team are driven by their own convictions and values, which makes them credible and authentic to others in their organisations and networks. We strive to be capable of working with others to create success in line with the mission of the organisation, not destructive troublemakers. It's still about us striving in that last sentence, though, as we've been known to cross that line and become completely disruptive from time to time. I know that our service manager still talks about me throwing her under a bus at audit times from time to time. Yeah. So one of the difficulties in all this, I think, is professionalisation. And I'd just like to sort of widen this out and talk about citizenship, like last slide of Libby's was talk to citizens. And I'll quote Walter Ulrich now. Professional practice tends to put citizens in a situation of incompetence, even when it is supposed to serve them. In a civil society, this is not an acceptable state of affairs. In a civil society, the ultimate source of legitimacy lies with the citizen. Hence, a reflective professional practice that is grounded in an adequate concept of civil society should give citizens a meaningful and competent role to play. Reflective practice then depends on competent citizenship. So the biggest stumbling blocks to providers and consumers working together is because providers, what I try to understand, providers kind of feel it's their job and their job alone to design services. After all, ensuring we all understand how we go about these relationships are key. It's about the mortar and not just the bricks that make a building strong. The mortar in this context is consumer leadership and mutual reliance, an underlying sense of connectedness that builds trust. This concept takes on a vital importance in health that is often routinely beset by change, surprise, and ambiguity. Connectedness will make us more resilient and better able to handle conflict well. This may sound like an abstract idea, but relating well, getting to know each other are the small things that make a big difference. As I've mentioned earlier, using direct, honest, respectful communication, talking with each other instead of about each other. Maybe we mean to spend as much time thinking about our interactions as we do the actions. And the challenges ahead. A significant challenges in how we translate into action and business as usual, the increasing interest in the major paradigm shift that is articulated in phrases like, it's not what's the matter, but what matters to you. Acting on the shift of thinking, how do we listen not just with our minds, but with our hearts as well, and I see this challenge as about compassionate relationships. It's about relationships being based on hope and possibility rather than being organised around risk and fear. It is about learning together rather than just setting up another type of helper-helpee relationship. And the task ahead will always continue to be challenging, and I guess it has been and always will be that way. We need to celebrate and reward success and make people feel like they're doing something that really matters, something that really adds value to their community and the work. To challenge myself recently, I stepped out to work at Mid-Central DHB a day a week and look forward to how I can disturb the waters of change in a larger DHB. Being in service to the health system as a system co-designer, consumer leaders using values and visions and their humanity is very definitely, to me, something that does matter. And I hope something that adds real value to the community and communities within which I live. So thank you for listening.